My sister-in-law filmed me crying when my husband filed for divorce, posted it in our family chat group, and the whole family laughed at my breakdown. What they didn't know was that 3 hours earlier, I had won $5.2 million in the lottery. Before I tell you how I got revenge, subscribe to our channel. It might be just a click for you, but for us, it's the fuel to keep searching for and bringing you these incredible stories. My name is Jennifer. I'm 38 years old, and for 15 years, I lived what everyone considered the perfect American dream. A 2-story house in Westchester County, a backyard with a white picket fence, a successful husband who worked in Manhattan. From the outside, our life looked straight out of a Hallmark commercial. But inside, I was slowly dying, suffocated by a family that never truly accepted me. Every Sunday gathering was an ordeal, every holiday a silent battle. They had a subtle way of making me feel small, insignificant, as if I were just a temporary intruder. And my husband, David, he always sided with them, making it clear I was the outsider. The worst part was his sister, Karen, a successful lawyer who looked at me as if I were an annoying insect. Karen had everything I supposedly didn't: a brilliant career, an apartment on the Upper East Side, and that arrogant confidence only privileged people possess. She made a point of reminding me at every opportunity that I was just an elementary school teacher in a public school. "How cute, Jen still plays school," she used to say with that fake smile. During family barbecues, she would tell stories of her million-dollar cases, while I stood silent, serving potato salad. David never defended me, just laughed nervously and changed the subject. I learned to swallow humiliation like bitter medicine. For years, I believed they might be right, that I really wasn't good enough to be part of that family. But I was about to discover that underestimating someone can be the biggest mistake of your life.
The tension at home had become unbearable in recent months. David came home late, always with excuses about work, but I sensed there was something more. He avoided my gaze at breakfast, answered in monosyllables when I tried to talk. Our conversations were reduced to domestic logistics. Who would pick up the dry cleaning? Whether we needed to buy milk? Love had gradually evaporated, replaced by a cold, distant courtesy. I found myself looking at our wedding photos, trying to remember when everything started to fall apart. It was as if I were invisible in my own home. Every day that passed, I felt more alone, more desperate. The irony is that in my darkest moments, I used to fantasize about a different life, about freedom, about starting over. I never imagined the universe was about to deliver exactly that.
My only escape was my secret tradition. Every Friday, after school, I'd stop at the same gas station on Route 9 and buy lottery tickets. Always the same numbers: 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, and 18 as the Powerball. They were important dates in my life. My mother's birthday, the day I graduated, when David proposed to me. Ironically, I even included the anniversary of our first serious fight. It was my ritual of hope, my small rebellion against the suffocating monotony of my life. The other teachers didn't know. David didn't know. No one knew about my 5 weekly dollars invested in impossible dreams. I kept the tickets in a small box in my office, along with old letters and photos. It was my most innocent secret, my most private fantasy. Every week, I would check the numbers on Saturday morning, always hoping, always disappointed, but never completely giving up on that little light of hope. At school, I was Miss Jennifer, whom all the students loved, the teacher who made math fun and remembered every child's birthday. But at home, I was just the wife who couldn't have children, who didn't have an impressive career, who didn't fit the Wilson family's mold. The difference was stark and painful. I had lost my identity somewhere between trying to please a family that would never accept me and living with a man who seemed to have forgotten why he married me. My self-esteem was in tatters, my confidence completely destroyed. I avoided mirrors, avoided family photos, avoided anything that reminded me of how small my life had become. In my worst moments, I wondered if they were right, if I really was a walking disappointment. It was in this state of mind that I was when destiny decided to intervene spectacularly. Friday, November 15th, 2024. A date that would be etched in my memory forever. The day started like any other. Silent breakfast with David, reading emails on his phone, a lesson on fractions with my adorable students, grading papers during lunch break. Autumn was particularly beautiful in Westchester, with its trees painted in gold and red. I had planned a quiet night at home, perhaps watching Netflix while David worked on his laptop. It was the perfectly ordinary and perfectly miserable life I had built. Nothing indicated that in less than 24 hours, my entire existence would be turned upside down. There was no way to predict that this would be the last Friday of my old life, the last day I would just be Jennifer Wilson, the invisible teacher. The universe had prepared a twist that would change everything, but for now, I was just a lost woman, buying hope for $5 a week. The perfect storm was about to begin.
Friday, November 15th, 3:47 p.m. I stopped at the Shell station on Route 9, as I had for 5 years. The attendant, a Mexican gentleman named Miguel, already knew me and always smiled when I arrived. "The usual numbers, Señora Jennifer?" he'd ask, and I'd nod. $5, always the same numbers. 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, Powerball 18. I put the ticket in my wallet without much thought, as I always did. It was part of the routine, not a real expectation. On the way home, I stopped by Starbucks and grabbed a pumpkin spice latte, trying to extend those few minutes of peace as much as possible before returning to the icy atmosphere of my house. Westchester streets were beautiful with the fall leaves, children playing in yards, happy families that made me feel even more alone. I drove slowly, savoring these moments of freedom between work and domestic hell. I didn't know I was carrying in my purse the ticket that would change my life forever. David arrived home at 9:30 p.m., as usual, exuding stress and a women's perfume he thought I wouldn't notice. We ate dinner in silence, watching the news, each lost in our own thoughts. He went up to his office to finish some reports, and I stayed in the living room flipping through a People magazine without paying attention. This had been our routine for months, coexisting like two strangers who shared expenses. Around 11 p.m., I went up to the bedroom and found David already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling, and wondering how my life had become so empty. The silence in the house was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of traffic on the 287. I couldn't sleep, so I went down to the kitchen and made chamomile tea. Sitting at the table where I had so often tried to have conversations that never happened, I had no idea that in a few hours, everything would change. Saturday passed in a monotonous blur, filled with mundane chores and David's usual distance. Sunday morning arrived with the irritating sound of the neighbor's lawnmower at 8 a.m. David had already left for his morning run, another of his sudden new obsessions. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen counter with my laptop, checking school emails and planning lessons for Monday. It was a typical Westchester morning, quiet, predictable, morally dead. On a whim, I opened the lottery website to check the numbers from Friday night. It was part of the Sunday morning ritual,
like reading the horoscope. You do it knowing you'll be disappointed. I typed in my password, clicked the results link. The numbers appeared on the screen. 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, Powerball 18. I blinked several times, thinking I was seeing things. I pulled the ticket from my wallet with trembling hands. I checked once, twice, 3 times. It was real. It was impossible, but it was real. All the numbers matched perfectly. My first instinct was to check the prize amount. The screen loaded slowly, as if the universe wanted to build suspense. When I saw the number, my heart stopped. $5.2 million. $5,200,000. I, Jennifer Wilson, the failed teacher no one took seriously, had just won more money than the entire Wilson family earned in years. My hands trembled so much I spilled coffee on the counter. I wiped it mechanically, still in shock, still trying to process the information. I checked the numbers one more time, then another. It was real. It was true. It was mine. For the first time in years, I started to cry, but not from sadness. These were tears of relief, of freedom, of infinite possibilities. I was free, financially independent. I would never have to put up with the Wilson family's arrogance again. I would never have to feel small again. Power had changed hands in a matter of seconds. My first impulse was to tell David, but something stopped me. An inner voice whispered, "Wait, think before you act." And I paused to think. If I told him now, he would side with me out of self-interest, not love. The Wilson family would suddenly treat me like royalty, but it would be fake, motivated by greed. I wanted to know how they truly felt about me, without the influence of money. I decided to keep it a secret for a few days, maybe a week. I wanted to see how they would treat me knowing I was just the failed Jennifer. It would be a final test for a marriage that was already dead. I hid the ticket in my memory box in the office, along with old letters from my mother. David came back from his run, sweaty and breathless, and gave me a perfunctory kiss on the forehead. "I'm going to shower," he said, without asking how my morning was. Perfect. He suspected nothing. The test had begun, and I already knew how it would end. The rest of that Sunday morning passed in a strange blur. I tidied up the house, folded laundry, did mundane chores while carrying the biggest secret of my life. It was surreal to walk through the aisles of Whole Foods, knowing I would never have to worry about money again, yet still putting sale items in my cart out of habit. Every person I met, the teenage cashier, the elderly bagger, other shoppers, had no idea they were seeing a multimillionaire disguised as an ordinary housewife. David spent the morning doing whatever he did on Sundays, emerging only for lunch. We talked about trivial things. The electricity bill had arrived, we needed to change the air conditioner filter, subjects that no longer mattered to me, but which were still his reality. I watched my husband of 15 years as if he were a stranger, analyzing every word, every gesture. The test was working better than I imagined. He truly didn't see me as an equal, as a partner. I was just part of the furniture.
Sunday afternoon brought the call I had been both expecting and dreading. "Jen, family lunch today, 1 p.m. at Mom's place," David announced while scrolling through his phone. It was the sacred Wilson tradition, Sunday lunch at the matriarch's house, where Karen always had some success story to tell, and I was always the target of passive-aggressive comments. "Mom's making her special roast beef," he added, as if that would cheer me up. I smiled and nodded, but inside, I was calculating.
This would be the perfect opportunity for the final test. I would see how the family would treat me at their worst, unfiltered, when they thought I was completely dependent on them. I put on my best dress, the blue one David said he liked years ago, and prepared for the performance of my life. I would be the humble, submissive Jennifer for the last time. After that lunch, everything would change forever. Little did I know that David had his own plans for that Sunday, plans that would make my revenge even sweeter. My mother-in-law's house in Scarsdale was as imposing as ever, a red brick colonial with perfectly manicured gardens, the kind of home that appears in magazines about the American dream. Margaret Wilson had inherited the property from her late husband and made sure everyone knew she was the undisputed matriarch of the family. We arrived at 12:30 p.m. sharp. David always insisted on punctuality when it came to his mother. Karen was already there, of course, her black BMW parked in the driveway like a status symbol. She greeted me with that same fake smile. "Oh, Jen, what an interesting dress." "Here we go," I thought. I took a deep breath and smiled back, knowing it would be the last time I would allow her to treat me that way. Margaret gave me a perfunctory hug and mumbled something about me looking a little pale. The house smelled of roast beef and family politics, a combination that always made me nauseous. But today was different. Today I had an invisible shield of $5.2 million. Lunch began as always, Margaret serving dish after dish as if it were a sacred ceremony, Karen dominating the conversation with stories from her law firm, David asking interested questions about his sister's multi-million-dollar cases. I sat in my usual spot, between David and the empty chair where the patriarch used to sit, listening politely and making minimal comments. "Jen, are you still teaching little kids?" Margaret asked with that tone that suggested I should have evolved into something better at 38. "Fourth grade," I corrected softly, though she perfectly well knew what grade I taught. Karen let out a little laugh. "At least it's a stable job, right? With benefits." The way she said stable sounded like an insult. David said nothing, just methodically cut his roast beef. It was like watching a play whose lines I knew by heart, except this time I knew how the story would really end. "You know, Jen," Karen continued, wiping her lips with her mother-in-law's expensive linen napkin, "a friend of mine is looking for someone to organize corporate events. It pays well, you'd work with important people. I can recommend you if you want." Her condescending tone was unbearable, as if she were doing me an immense favor, offering me crumbs from the successful adults' table. Margaret nodded enthusiastically. "How wonderful, Karen! Jen really needs new challenges, doesn't she, dear? Just staying with little kids can be limiting." Limiting. The word echoed in my head. There I was, a woman who had just won the lottery, being treated as if I were a teenager who needed career guidance. David finally spoke. "It's a good idea. Jen has always been good at organizing things." Always good at organizing things. As if I were an efficient secretary, not his wife. The disrespect was so normalized that they didn't even notice it anymore. After lunch, while Margaret served coffee and Karen checked urgent emails on her phone, David asked me to talk on the porch. My heart raced. There was something in his tone, a formality that wasn't normal. We went out to the patio overlooking the autumnal garden, and he stood while I sat in the wicker chair. "Jen," he began, his hands in his pockets, avoiding my gaze, "we need to talk about us." And there it was, the moment I had felt coming for months. "It's not working anymore." he continued, as if he were firing an incompetent employee. We both know we're not happy together anymore. I just watched him, interested to see how he would phrase the speech he had clearly rehearsed. I think it would be better for both of us if we went our separate ways. Separate ways. What a polite word for destroying 15 years of marriage. I felt tears begin to come, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure relief mixed with indignation. Is it about her? I asked calmly, surprising him with my composure. David turned red, confirming my suspicions. It's not about anyone specific, Jen. It's about us. You must have felt it too. The distance. Distance. As if I were to blame for not being enough. You want a divorce? I stated. I didn't ask. He nodded, relieved that I had said the word he couldn't pronounce. I'll be fair, Jen. You can keep the house, at least for a while, until you get back on your feet. Get back on my feet. As if I were a messy life that needed to be cleaned up. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot tears of humiliation and liberation. 15 years reduced to a 10-minute conversation on a Sunday porch. 15 years dismissed like a failed business venture. And the worst was yet to come. Let's go back inside, he said, uncomfortable with my tears. Maybe it's best to tell my family now since we're all here. We went back into the living room where Margaret and Karen waited with that expression of someone who knew exactly what had happened. They knew. Of course they knew. David had probably consulted his family before consulting me. Family, David announced, Jen and I have decided to separate. Margaret sighed dramatically and turned to me. Oh dear, I'm so sorry, but sometimes it's for the best. Karen couldn't hide a small smile of satisfaction. It's a mature decision, she said. You two can find people who are more compatible. Compatible. The word was a slap in the face. Margaret stood up and gave me a hug that felt more like a funeral. You'll always be part of the family, Jen. A lie. I knew I'd be forgotten before the next Sunday lunch. Karen pulled out her phone. Let me text the cousins. They'll want to know. And that's when it happened. She pointed the camera at me to capture my reaction as an abandoned, destroyed, and pitiful woman. Smile, Jen, Karen said with false sweetness, for posterity. But I couldn't stop crying. Not because of David or the marriage that was over. I was crying because I finally saw those people for who they really were. Small, petty creatures who needed to humiliate others to feel important. Karen filmed for almost 30 seconds, capturing every tear, every broken breath. Margaret even said, "Poor thing," while watching me fall apart. David looked away, too cowardly to watch the destruction he had caused. But what they didn't know, what none of them could imagine, was that those tears were of liberation. They were the tears of a woman being freed from a prison she didn't realize she was in. Karen lowered her phone with satisfaction, already mentally composing the message she would send with the video. Well, I guess that's enough drama for today. Drama. As if my life falling apart was entertainment for them? They had no idea the real drama was just beginning. In the car, during the 20 minutes back home, David drove in silence while I tried to process what had just happened. My phone started vibrating incessantly. One message, then another, then several. Jen, are you okay? OMG, I saw the video. Girl, what happened? It was the Wilson family group chat. Uncles, cousins, in-laws, everyone had received the video of my humiliation. Karen had been quick. I opened the group and there it was, a 30-second video of me crying hysterically with the caption, "Drama Queen finally gets reality check." 23 people had viewed it. 12 had reacted with laughing emojis. Comments started appearing. Finally, David is free. She always was too emotional. Every word was a stab. But instead of pain, I felt something else building inside me. Fury. Pure, concentrated rage. David glanced at my phone and said casually, "You should probably leave the family group chat to avoid more drama." More drama. As if my pain was inconvenient for him. At home, I went straight to my office and locked the door. I picked up the small box where I kept my memories and took out the lottery ticket. $5.2 million. The numbers stared back at me like an antidote to every humiliation I had just endured. I went back to my phone and watched the video again. Karen's voice narrating. Poor Jen having her breakdown. So dramatic. Cousins commenting, "She never fit in anyway. David deserves better. Always knew she was unstable." 27 views now. My pain was entertainment for the entire Wilson family. But what they didn't know was that they had just created their own monster. A rich, angry, completely liberated monster. I screenshotted every comment, saved every reaction. Evidence. I would be methodical about this. If they wanted drama, they were about to get the performance of their lives. My transformation would begin tomorrow. Tonight, I would plan every detail of their downfall. David spent the evening packing a suitcase, probably to stay with his girlfriend, whoever she was. He avoided me completely, communicating through text messages, even though we were in the same house. I'll stay at Mark's for a few days while we figure things out. Mark, his college friend who always thought I wasn't good enough for David. Perfect. I helped him pack with fake politeness, even folding his shirts the way he liked. "Take your time," I told him sweetly. "I understand this is difficult for you too." He looked surprised by my composure, maybe even guilty. "Jen, I hope we can be civil about this, divide things fairly." Fairly. As if 15 years of my life could be divided fairly. "Of course," I smiled. "I want what's best for both of us." He left around 9 p.m., kissing my forehead like I was his sister, not the woman who had loved him since college. The house fell silent, and for the first time in years, it felt peaceful. Alone, finally, I called the lottery office first thing Monday morning. "Yes, I need to claim a prize," I said, my voice steady. The process was surprisingly simple. They scheduled me for Tuesday afternoon at their office in Albany. "Congratulations, Mrs. Wilson. Life-changing money." Life-changing indeed. Next, I called the best divorce attorney in Westchester County. Ironically, someone Karen had mentioned during one of her boastful stories about high-profile cases. "I need someone ruthless," I told his secretary. "Money is not an issue." I scheduled a consultation for Wednesday. Then I did something that felt incredible. I called my principal and took a personal week off. "Family emergency," I explained. Not exactly a lie. My family emergency was about to become the Wilson family's nightmare. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. For the first time in 15 years, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. Tuesday afternoon, Albany. Walking into the lottery office felt surreal, like entering a different dimension where dreams actually come true. The paperwork was extensive, but I didn't care. After taxes, my net winnings would be approximately $3.1 million. Still more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. The check presentation was formal, with photos for their marketing materials. "What will you do with the money?" the director asked. "Start a new life," I answered honestly. They set up direct deposit to a new account I had opened that morning, an account David knew nothing about. Driving back to Westchester, I felt like a completely different person. Rich Jennifer was confident, powerful, untouchable. Poor Jennifer was dead and buried. Now came the fun part, letting the Wilson family discover what they had lost when they decided to throw me away like garbage. Wednesday morning brought my first surprise. David returned to the house while I was having coffee, looking sheepish and uncomfortable. "Jen, we need to talk," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table where we used to share breakfast in happier times. "I've been thinking, maybe we rushed into this. Maybe we should try counseling first." I almost choked on my coffee. Counseling? After 15 years of him treating me like a roommate, after asking for divorce in front of his family, after letting them humiliate me. "What changed your mind?" I asked innocently. He fidgeted with his wedding ring. "I realized I still care about you, about us." Translation: his girlfriend probably dumped him, or he realized starting over at 42 wasn't as appealing as it seemed. "That's interesting timing," I said carefully. "What about your family? They seemed pretty supportive of the divorce." He winced. "They don't understand our relationship. Only we do." "Too little, too late, David. Way too late."
That afternoon, I met with Jonathan Kessler, the divorce attorney. His office overlooked downtown White Plains, all glass and steel and expensive leather furniture. "Mrs. Wilson," he said after reviewing my situation, "given the length of your marriage and your limited income, you're entitled to substantial alimony and half of all marital assets." I smiled. "Mr. Kessler, there's something you should know before we proceed." I showed him my lottery ticket and bank statement. His eyebrows raised significantly. "This changes everything," he said slowly. "This was won the day before he asked for divorce?" "Exactly." "Mrs. Wilson, you hit the jackpot in more ways than one. In New York State, since you won this prize during the marriage, technically it's marital property." I interrupted him. "I don't want his money, Mr. Kessler. I want to make sure he doesn't get any of mine." The smile that crossed his face was predatory. "Now that's going to be interesting. Let me make some calls." By Friday, the Wilson family would know exactly what they had lost when they decided to humiliate me. The revenge was about to begin. Friday morning, exactly 1 week after buying the winning ticket, I woke up in my empty house feeling more alive than I had in years. My phone showed 17 missed calls from David. Apparently, Mr. Kessler had delivered the news about my lottery win as part of the divorce proceedings. I could imagine his face when he learned that his poor, pathetic wife was now worth millions. The family group chat had exploded overnight with messages I couldn't see anymore since I had wisely left the group, but friends were forwarding me screenshots. "Did you know about the money? Why didn't Jen tell us? We need to fix this situation." Fix this situation. As if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person they had systematically destroyed. I made myself a leisurely breakfast of Eggs Benedict, something I had never bothered to make when David lived here, and prepared for what would be the most satisfying day of my life. The doorbell rang at 9 a.m. sharp. Karen stood on my doorstep, no longer the confident lawyer, but a woman who looked like she hadn't slept. "Jen, we need to talk," she said, her voice uncharacteristically humble. I invited her in and offered coffee, playing the gracious hostess. "I heard about your good fortune," she began carefully. "That's wonderful news, life-changing." I nodded, stirring sugar into my coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch. "About Sunday, about the video, I think there might have been some misunderstandings." Misunderstandings. How creative. Which part was misunderstood, Karen? The part where you filmed me crying, or the part where you shared it with the entire family for entertainment? She flinched. "I was trying to help. I thought you were having a breakdown and needed support." Support? By posting my humiliation online with laughing emojis? I was emotional, I agreed.
Finding out your husband wants a divorce tends to have that effect. Jen, Karen leaned forward, her lawyer instincts kicking in. I want to apologize, sincerely. What I did was wrong, and I hope you can forgive me. I studied her face, looking for genuine remorse, but finding only calculated damage control. Of course, Karen. Family is family, right? Relief flooded her features. Exactly. And about the comments in the group chat, people say things when they're surprised. No one meant any harm. No harm. 27 people laughing at my pain was no harm. I understand, I said softly. People reveal their true selves in crisis moments. She missed the subtle threat entirely. So we're good? You'll talk to David about reconciliation? This divorce thing is just stress talking. Reconciliation? With a man who publicly humiliated me and a family who celebrated my destruction? I'll certainly consider it, I lied smoothly. Karen left feeling satisfied that she had managed the situation. She had no idea she had just walked into a trap.
By noon, the parade had begun. Margaret called first, her voice syrupy with fake concern. Jennifer, dear, I heard the most wonderful news. How blessed you are. Blessed? Where was God's blessing when she was calling me limited and dramatic? It's quite a surprise, I replied neutrally. We should celebrate. Family dinner this Sunday, just like always. Things can go back to normal now. Normal, where I pretended to respect people who had zero respect for me. That sounds lovely, Margaret. David arrived an hour later, with flowers, roses, which he had never bought me in 15 years of marriage. Jen, baby, I made a terrible mistake, he said, actually getting on his knees in our living room. I was going through a midlife crisis. You're the love of my life. Baby! He hadn't called me baby since our honeymoon. The timing is interesting, I observed. Yesterday, I was a burden. Today, I'm the love of your life? He had the decency to look ashamed. I know how it looks, but the money doesn't matter. I just realized what I was losing. David, I said, helping him stand. You did lose something, but it wasn't what you think. He looked confused, hope flickering in his eyes. You lost the chance to discover who I really am when I'm not trying to please people who despise me. I walked to my office and returned with printed screenshots of the family group chat comments. This is what your family really thinks of me, and this is what you allowed them to think for 15 years. His face went pale as he read comment after comment. She's so pathetic. David can do better. Always knew she was unstable. Finally, he's free. 27 people who had eaten at my table, accepted my Christmas gifts, pretended to care about me. Jen, they were shocked. People say stupid things. I held up my hand. David, I want you to leave. The divorce papers are already filed. You'll get nothing because the money was won after you requested the divorce, but before it was finalized. His jaw dropped. You can't be serious. Deadly serious. I've discovered I quite like being rich and single. The next few weeks brought a steady stream of Wilson family members to my door, each with their own version of damage control. Cousins who had liked the humiliation video now claimed they were just being supportive. Margaret sent expensive flowers with cards about family forgiveness. Karen's children, who had been taught to see me as lesser, suddenly wanted Aunt Jen to visit their school events. It was pathetic and transparent, but also deeply satisfying. I remained polite, gracious, and completely unmoved by their suddenly discovered affection. To each of them, I said the same thing. I appreciate you reaching out. I'm exploring my options.
My options included a new life far from Westchester County, far from people who measured human worth by bank accounts and social status. I put the house on the market and hired a moving company. My new life would begin somewhere they couldn't find me, somewhere I could be rich Jennifer without the baggage of poor Jennifer's past. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my penthouse apartment in Charleston, South Carolina. The view of the harbor is breathtaking, and I wake up every morning grateful for that terrible Sunday when my old life ended. David married his girlfriend in a small ceremony. I heard through mutual friends. Karen lost several clients when word spread about her treatment of family members. Apparently, wealthy people don't trust lawyers who humiliate relatives for sport. Margaret's bridge club dropped her when they learned she had driven away a lottery winner through petty cruelty. I started a foundation for teachers, helping educators pursue dreams they thought were impossible. It's named the Jennifer Miller Foundation. I took back my maiden name. The best part? I never have to see any of them again. Sometimes the cruelest thing people can do is show you exactly who they are when they think you have nothing left to lose. The Wilson family gave me the greatest gift imaginable. They set me free. And for that, I will always be grateful.